Good evening. Welcome to Open Microphone. This is Maxim Grigoriev here and my co-host Charles Bausman.
Hi, Maxim.
Hello.
Good to see you.
Today we will discuss President Putin's speech. The formal name is Presidential Address to the Federal Assembly.
Yeah, a really interesting speech. And we're very lucky today. We've got a great journalist with us, Hauker Hawkson from Icelandic Radio. He's been in Moscow for years and really understands what's going on here.
Yeah, Charles is quite right. I've been here for 33 years, even 2 years during Soviet power in 90 and 91. So I have quite a lot of experience in reporting from Russia. That's right.
Fantastic.
Nice to be with you.
And Maxim, tell us, you were at the speech yesterday, right? So tell us a little bit, what was the atmosphere like? What kind of impression was there in the room?
Yes, I was there, as well as deputies, ministers, senators, well-known journalists, political elite, social elite, public figures. And there was big support there. Mm-hmm. Very warm atmosphere. I think that the approach of the Western countries is to make Russian people suffer because of the economical sanctions, war, everything. That's what they openly discuss. And according to that Western approach, I think they expected that Russian people after that suffer, they will organize some pressure on the president to change the course. Mm-hmm. But the results was completely different. From historical point of view, Russian people under external pressure, they are always united. And exactly what we had now during that special operation. Yeah. And there was a big support from political elite, and the opinion polls gives the same high figures, high level of support from ordinary people. I'll give you the exact figures. I think that the results of opinion polls, it's that after the beginning of the special operation, the level of support of President Putin became about 80%. And this is very high level. And it remains on a very high level. Mm-hmm. So the same support I saw during the Putin speech.
You saw evidence of this in the speech.
And that's interesting that the speech were often interrupted with the standing ovations. Mm-hmm. So we have political elite united, mm-hmm. with the core is President Putin, and the Russian people is united. Yeah. And they support president, and they support special military operation.
Yeah. Well, you have to say it's not that surprising because it's not just Russian people who unite under pressure. It's a natural thing for any country to do.
No, I don't think so. Uh-huh. Maybe some. Uh-huh. Maybe some, not everybody. You know that during World War II, many nations, they want to be united, but they failed. I mean that, for example, Poland, they short period, and they go on.
I guess I'm
I mean that the government, Polish government, they mm-hmm. was out of the country very soon, mm-hmm. and some other European countries. So this is not.
I guess
there is some differences, but Russian people, they always unite. I mean, during Napoleon Wars and World War I, World War II.
I'm speaking from American experience. Every time America gets into a military conflict,
it was not very long.
The support
maybe about 200 years.
Yeah,
less than Russian. And less than Chinese.
But we fight a lot of wars, even though we're a young country. We're always fighting somebody. Anyway, when we fight people, support for the president and the government always goes up.
And sometimes it goes down. But
yes.
now the support of the Putin President Putin is on a very high level, about 80%, and this is more than 1 year, and that's a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Can you really trust those Russian opinion polls, though? I mean, I always, when I see an opinion poll, I'm always thinking, okay, so somebody ordered this poll, somebody made this poll, how much do I trust them that they're like, give me the right information? Because in America, for example, nobody listens to polls anymore because they're just a bunch of PR and propaganda.
Oh, no.
Can you trust these Russian polls?
I don't think so. I think that Gallup and some other American companies, of course, some are more democratic, some are Republicans, so you take both and divide it. Yeah. And this is maybe this will be true. Same in Russia. We have different companies who organize on this sociological surveys, opinion polls.
Okay.
And some of them they are from opposition. So I think this is reality. What is your impression?
Yeah, thank you for the question. You know, I think Maxim is completely right that the consolidation of the Russian society is when if you take 1 year ago, you know, the support for the SMO, special military operation, it was less than today, and those 80, 82, 85, or around 80% support of Putin today. You know, he got 77% support for his constitution. He got 75% election when he was elected president last time. But if you take the whole masses of Russian nation, people in the provinces, then the longer from Moscow, the longer from Ukraine, the more supportive, you know. But the intelligentsia of young people, of singers, dancers, musicians, you know, actors, they are divided. But the lower parts, or the less educated, or how to put it, less money, you know, it's 90-95%. And if you just talk to the taxists in Moscow, if you talk to the, if you're in the provinces, if you're in deep Russia, and far away, maybe in Siberia or something, in those regions, in the Far East, you have huge support.
So let's talk about probably the most important political event of the speech, which was that Putin announced that Russia was going to withdraw from the most important arms control agreement that it has with the United States. And a lot of people around the world have commented on this and commented what a big deal this is, because it was very hard and took many years to put these agreements together, going back to Ronald Reagan, who started it. And the fact that Russia is pulling out of the last big one strikes many observers as very ominous. What's the view in Moscow about this? Are people worried?
If you don't mind, I will add that after Americans decide to finish everything with other agreements.
Right. Yes, the Americans were first to start withdrawing from agreements, but I understand this was the last big one that was still in force, and now Russia is saying, was it a PR move on Russia's part, or do they have legitimate security interests?
I think this is a very important decision. You know that the maybe way of thinking, American way of thinking, the strategy, American strategy was to cooperate with Russia on the lines, on the issues which was interesting for Americans. Some lines, including this strategic nuclear weapons and everything, and have a confrontation on other issues which is not interested, where they think that they are strong. And this was the American strategy. But now President Putin, he told no, no business as usual. Everything is linked together. We can't be on the situation with this proxy war on some issues, Ukraine and everything. We can't be in the situation where is economic war from the West with Russia, from Europe with Russia goes economic war. And at the same time, we have usual business, usual cooperation on nuclear arms.
Cooperation.
Now,
cooperation
I think that this is a very important decision.
Yeah.
We fighting, or we are cooperating. everything is linked. And this is the most important thing. Mm-hmm. This is the very important turning in all American-Russian relations.
Tell us, Hawker, what are people saying in Europe? The Europeans historically, like in the 80s and 90s, were very worried about this, these nuclear weapons, and there was a big peace movement in Germany and other places. What are the Europeans saying about the fact that this treaty is ending?
Well, the mood of the Europeans is changing. It's very interesting how those things are changing. You mentioned Reagan, Gorbachev. Reagan, they met in Reykjavik in October in '86, and then those protests were going all around the continent against the Pershing II, against the armament race in Europe. But this class of intelligentsia, of left-wing people in Iceland, social democratic forces and so on, and even the left green and left socialists, now they are very, very anti-Russian. So this class or this clan has changed a lot from being neutral for dialogue. Now this clan and these people, they go for armament of Ukraine, supporting this bizarre, strange regime with a black hole of corruption. So, and the era, like Maxim is saying, it has just changed so dramatically that I would, for example, expect from these journalistics, from the writers, from the intelligentsia of the West to be worried. But I don't see such a mood, if to your question, Charles, because they say armament, we must arm Ukraine more and more and more, And there is no voice or, voices or nobody is proposing, to sit down and have a dialogue.
Well, what about those big demonstrations in Berlin over the last couple of days? I think some people are saying there may be 30, 40, 50,000 people on the street. Does that represent any kind of significant mood among the general population?
Yeah, maybe, but I was talking about Iceland in this case, but people are waking up gradually, eventually in Europe against these armaments. They want dialogue, they want peace. Maybe they are waking up in Germany again, but of course Germany has a special psychology, of course, and it is very near to the German soul, wars and warfare and arming Ukraine again. So I would say healthy forces, in my opinion, are gathering together and coming up with those demonstrations. But if you take, for example, Scandinavian countries, Iceland in this case, no demonstrations are in favor of dialogue, peace talks, or stopping war, stop armament, and stop financing this strange regime of the Russian.
There is another important thing that's about those demonstrations. Mm-hmm. That's not just because of peace that they want peace. They're afraid of escalation and everything. I think that in Europe there's a lot of people who understand that war, it costs a lot to the ordinary people. Yeah. That from economical point of view, first they give them a lot of billions money to Ukraine from European Union. This is the first thing. And the second thing, that there is the cooperation between Russia and Europe was very close. And a lot of European spheres, they depend on Russian supply.
Sure. Yeah.
And now without this, everybody in Europe paying a lot, and people doesn't like this. This is not a question of the existence of the Europe, because for Annalena Baerbock, maybe this is the main goal of her life. Yeah. But for ordinary people, the Ukrainian problems, that's something else. They are out of the Europe. This is completely different from the problems which they have now.
I have this general impression also that in our current age, people are so active online that they almost think like, okay, well, I said something on Twitter, I don't need to go into the street. Whereas in the 1980s, the 1990s, this whole online life didn't exist. And
this means that this
and so people,
50,000...
if they wanted to say something, you had to go onto the street to make a difference. Now people are just sitting at home with their...
This means that this 50,000, that's a lot.
Yeah, it suggests that the population is, the support is bigger. Let's move, I think the main question, I know this is the main question people in the West who, from the alternative media, right? For people who, there's an enormous number of people in the West, both in America and Europe, who sympathize with Russia and want Russia to win this war. It might be hard for Russians to believe that, but it's true, it really is. There's a lot of people out there. And they the question they really want to know is, how is this war going? Who's going to win? When is somebody going to win? When is it going to be over? And is this big offensive coming that people keep saying will be coming? For example, you know, in the alternative media, it's an interesting situation in the Western alternative media. They're all pro-Russia. Yeah, it's like across the board. And there are like, you know, 5 or 6 famous guys like Scott Ritter, who's actually well known now in Russia, Colonel McGregor, the Duran, and anyway, these other groups. And they've all been saying for 4 or 5 months, there's a big Russian offensive is coming, a big Russian offensive is coming, and nothing seems to be happening. So a lot of people are wondering about that. So let's ask Maxime, because he's got incredible access. You visit the Donbass regularly. You've been there many times.
I even was on the front line, so
yeah,
I know something. Of course, I know nothing about offensive when it will be.
Yeah.
But the main
what's
point
your
is
feeling
that
about it? Like,
Russia is ready for the long war.
Yeah.
And I quote, just a minute, President Putin's words during the president's speech. We will step by step, carefully and consistently solve the tasks before us. Mm-hmm. This means that Russia is ready for the long war, 1, 2, 3, even maybe 4 years.
That's amazing, yeah.
And this is the main point.
Mm-hmm.
And our military complex now is growing up. New factories, new plants start to produce equipment.
Yeah.
Much more people involved. Mobilization, 300,000. And there is another training for them. So we are ready for the long war.
But Max, here, let me interrupt for a second. What is making people in the West, these are friends of Russia, people who sympathize with Russia, scratch their heads a little bit and wonder, they're like, wait a minute, Russia just did this big mobilization. They've got, 300, 400, 500,000 men ready to go all around the Ukraine, and they're not doing anything. And there's just this little, quite a small battle going on in Bakhmut, yeah, with his mostly being done by Wagner and maybe, I think, other Chechens still in there. But anyway, it's a small localized fight. And so the question is there going to be a big war, or is this going to just continue as like this small, limited military actions that could go on for many years?
I think that this is a Russian strategy. I mean that every day Ukraine lose a lot of people, a lot of equipment. Mm-hmm. Western gives a lot, mm-hmm. and Ukraine lose all those, maybe big part of those equipment, military equipment.
Yeah.
So our loss is not so big, mm-hmm. and Ukraine is very big. Mm-hmm. I think that Ukrainians lose more than the whole United Kingdom army at this moment.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
There's a lot of stuff.
And so I mean, I think that people for Ukrainian government is nothing. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, and they lose. And we have more and more military equipment, in Russia. Mm-hmm. And then somewhere we will have a turning point. Mm-hmm. And for example, we had the situation much worse I mean, for example, during Napoleon War, we have to go back, and back. And then Napoleon lose everything. And then we have big offensive everywhere.
I see, yeah. And the same thing happened in World
So
War II,
maybe I'm not a person from military, so maybe now we are making the situation where Ukrainians waste all resources, for example, people. And then we will be ready to organize.
So it sounds like you're saying that Russia is not in a hurry.
No,
And
not at
that,
all.
You know, it wouldn't be at all surprising if there was no offensive for the next 6 months or something.
I don't think that we will have a very big offensive and we capture Kyiv or something. I mean, big city, no. From whole front line, we have not just Bakhmut, not just Artyomovsk. We have a lot of villages, and we have a lot of attacks, Ukrainian attacks and our attacks. So there is a lot of activity. Maybe it's not so big, but there's a lot of activity everywhere on the front line. And I think we will move very carefully. Like President Putin said.
You know, that's so interesting, Hakar. I don't know what people are saying that you're reading, but that completely contradicts what the major analysts, Western analysts, are saying who are sympathetic to Russia. I mean, forget about the mainstream media. They're just completely useless. Everything they say is like ridiculous propaganda lie. So let's just talk about the alternative media in the West, which is big and influential. And they're all saying that there's going to be a huge offensive. And I think the biggest guy out there is Scott Ritter. And he keeps saying this. I saw him say it just the other day. He was like, just you wait. It's going to be another week or 2 or 3, and then the Russians are just going to come in and sweep the whole country. And like, you know,
we can't do that. But this means that we lose maybe 100,000
you lose
people
on
the front.
an
We doesn't want that.
Yeah.
We are ready to Ukrainians. They can waste their resources. I mean, people.
Yeah.
We are not ready. We doesn't want to lose about 100,000 Russian people there.
Sure. Hakar, what are people saying that you're listening to in terms of what's going to happen on the military side?
Well, I have been to those fronts. I've been there 5 or 6 times down there into Mariupol, westwards, and so on. The mood of the people, of the population, the mood of the soldiers, of the Russian nation, of boys down there, it is to go till the end, you know. And if you just talk to the Russian people, of course, on those talk shows, people agree and so on. But Russia is definitely fighting for its, life, existentially, I don't know, but for the future, that's definitely. And I think coherently, in a coherent way, gradually, and eventually Russians are going to move westwards. And as Putin and Shoigu and others say, they are sparing the life of military people and so on. And I asked, for example, Mr. Lavrov, it was a narrow meeting with correspondents the other day, and he told me that it will be no demarcation lines. You know, demarcation like in North Korea, like in Pakistan. We will not meet the poles in Western Ukraine. We will not just go to the Dnieper River. We will go till the end, you know. So still this is the mood in Moscow and this mood of the Russians. If this is maybe the Soviet school of warfare or the Russian school to do it gradually and coherent, you know, in this way. It's a big tragedy. And Maxim says that almost 200,000 Ukrainians fell, or 150 if you take the British army. This is gradually what is happening. And the West, Biden administration, nobody is showing any sorrow. This is a human tragedy, but they are like smiling. It's awful, of course, and so bizarre and awkward for those clans ruling.
This question of, I thought it was so interesting that, Putin spoke for 2 hours, and he devoted maybe half an hour to talking about the war and geopolitics and the West and everything.
Most of the speech
And then most
was
of the time-
about economics,
Yeah,
social things. That's like the image of the future.
So Max, I want to ask you,
that's-
what does that tell us? I mean, you'd think that, everybody was sitting there waiting for some like big speech about the war, and he was like, oh, here's some information about the war. Now I'm going to talk about what I really care about. And then he like spoke for like an hour and a half on social, economic
You're
issues.
right. You're right.
So what does that say about what he's thinking? Like,
I think this is a very important signal.
yeah, I thought so too.
These mean that Russian government, Russian people don't think only on their war issues.
Yeah.
Our government think about our future of the country, how to make country stronger, I mean from economical point of view, social things. So we have a lot of different plans how to make Russia better and how developed many new things. I mean, business, and there is some points, Putin points on the business too.
Yeah.
And it was very interesting that he discussed the alternative. The first is for the people who left Russia, some billionaires, rich people, and then they are in their houses, palaces, and with his accounts blocked by Western countries, trying to get some money from their closed accounts.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's another way to be with Russian people, not just because of the moral things, because they can develop their business much better, make stronger, because now there is a lot of opportunities, because Western countries, Western business, some of them, they left Russia, and there is some of them, they sell their businesses to Russian business, and there is a lot of, and of course, because of the sanctions, a whole big part of the Russian market is now free, and they are ready for the Russian business. So this is interesting.
As a Russian, when Putin is saying, okay, all you guys sitting in Europe, and I think he was talking just about the very wealthy, the billionaires, I think he was talking about just any successful Russian, even medium, average, high-paid professional or small businessman who ran away or haven't come to support Russia. As a Russian, do you trust those people? I mean, do you want those people to come back to Russia and be involved in your society? Because haven't they sort of shown...
That's a good question.
Haven't they shown that that they're not to be trusted and that they're not true patriots?
That's a very interesting question. And Putin, he told about those people. We doesn't want witch hunting. And so I think that if those people, they just afraid of something, for example, they're afraid to lose their money, or they're afraid to their opportunities, maybe they're afraid of their jobs, so they try to find jobs somewhere else. That's all right. And those people, they came back, and a lot of those people, for example, which are specialists in computer science, they came back.
Oh, they're starting to come back now?
And a lot.
Really?
Because they found that their life on the West is not so beautiful. And for them, it's not very important to be there, to be in Russia. They can work everywhere online. And the atmosphere on the West, not very good for them.
Right.
Their rights
the West
are
doesn't
not
really
protected.
trust them. They don't.
No, I mean that their rights, and they understand that their rights are not protected. Sure. If you are Russian, there is no laws, levels, high level of European civil rights. No, if you are Russian, that's different. This is just for Europeans. For Russians, we don't have any. It doesn't have any rights.
But there's another practical reason for that.
That a lot of people, they came back.
Yeah.
But I think that if those people, if you're against Russia, if you're helping Ukrainian army, for example, if you doesn't want to be in Russia, if you think that the Russian is the worst country in the world, there's some of them which think like something like this. I think that those people, if they decide to stay, maybe in the US or maybe in Europe, that's their choice.
So you're saying that the really
we don't
bad,
need them.
The really,
but if you obey the law, you can come back.
So you're saying the really bad people will never come back anyway, so you don't have to worry about them. But there might be some good Russians who left for economic reasons, or who can come back, and you would feel comfortable trusting them as part of your society. Because doesn't Russia have a huge problem? Like historically, it's been this true even under the czars, that there's this group of people that just loves the West and is always trying to undermine Russia, and it's been this like endless problem for Russia, that there's the patriotic Russians and then there's the pro-Western Russians who are constantly undermining the country. You're not worried at all about these people coming back here?
I think this is a question of not very big amount of them. That's not a big problem. That's it's parts of percentage.
Yeah.
Very small amount of the people we are talking about.
I'll tell you something else.
And another thing is that if you understand that Russia is much better place to live than US,
right.
And if you won't come back, if you are obeying the laws, Russian laws, I mean, that's not a problem at all.
There's a very practical reason why Russians will not be treated well in the West, because from the point of view of Western society, or say a Western employer, he doesn't know if this Russian guy is maybe a spy or a special agent or going to cause some kind of problem for him. He's going to
I think if somebody works in the shop, for example, maybe even if he's a spy, useless,
but still,
completely useless.
If you're a Western employer, it's much less low risk just to hire somebody else and not deal with the Russians.
I think the main problem is with Chinese, because in America the main enemy is Chinese. The people doesn't want to work with them, but most of those Chinese, they like United States. They're doing a lot. So this is another big mistake, American big mistake.
Yeah, tell us, Hauker, how do Europeans look at these Russians who have come flooding into the continent? And I guess to an extent also, there's a huge number of Ukrainian refugees. Are people happy to see them? Do they treat them fairly? Do they treat them equally? Do they have rights, civil rights?
For example, during the Vietnam Wars, Olof Palme and the Swedish authorities, they adopted several thousand American soldiers which defected or didn't want to fight in Vietnam, But now, for example, in Finland, Sanna Marin, and also in Sweden and so on, they don't want to have any single Russian young man who is a defector or doesn't want to fight in Ukraine, So this is maybe a racistic thing or something, but you see that it's quite different attitude if you're Russian, if you're Ukrainian. Even if you're Russian, dissident, or how to put it, or if you hate Putin and are trying to diminish his power and topple the government, because you are a Russian nation with this red passport, you are a persona non grata or of the second or third sort,
Okay, great. Well, listen, Hauker, thank you so much for joining us today. We're at the end of the show. Max.
I think that the main issue, that the main point of this presidential speech is that Russia, maybe this will be interesting for you and the audience, that we are ready for the long war. And second is, we not just thinking about the war. We're thinking about economical sphere. We're thinking about the future Russia. And this is the main thing. It's more than two half of the whole speech.
This is what struck me also. I really got the impression
Two-thirds of the
that
whole
Russia
presidential
was just
speech.
saying, okay, so we're fighting this war, we can handle it, it's not the biggest problem right now for us, and we're just going to go forward and learn to live in a different world, different conditions, and we'll be fine. And our country will develop and grow, and people will go to work, and people will go on vacation, and we'll build schools, and we'll have new social programs. And I thought that was very interesting. It didn't sound like a speech of a president who was like, in some dangerous or desperate military conflict. It was more like, oh, this is just a low-level thing. We're fighting, yeah, we're going to win. We're not worried. Now let's talk about, moving on with our lives. So I thought that was interesting. And you would agree with that? You would agree with that, yeah?
Yes,
that Russia is doing fine.
The right
it's doing
point
fine,
of view.
actually.
All right, so this was the program Open Microphone, and we welcome you to the next program. Thank you.